Hey there, Summoners! I'm glad to see you guys again. My name is Tia, and I'll be your host for our Vision Guide. Like you'd expect, we'll provide some tips and help you better understand how to effectively gain vision for your team. I encourage you guys to subscribe if you do that, and also join our Discord. You're eligible to join an RP giveaway we're holding. Now, let's get started with the video. First off, I'm going to begin by mentioning that vision is a job for the entire team. Don't neglect vision control, regardless of what champion or role you play. Vision is crucial as both an offensive and defensive tool because it provides information. Whenever you're trying to push for a turret or take a neutral objective like Dragon, you're right to feel paranoid if the map is dark. Having vision surrounding whatever you're pushing for helps to alleviate the anxiety and also give your team information to quickly adapt. If there's anything you get from this video, just remember this: deep vision is best. This is a crucial part of playing the game at a high level. Seeing an enemy deeper into their jungle gives your team time to back off when overextended. It can also tell you where your enemy is not. If you see multiple opponents stuck on the top side of the map, you have the necessary information to pull the trigger and make a play bottom. That said, let's talk about what makes a good ward and what makes a bad ward. Fortunately, even if you're easily discouraged when you perform poorly, there's some great news. There are very few bad wards in this game. I can probably name 99% of them for you right now. When you miss a brush and the vision is obscured, warding in front of an enemy turret while it's still alive, and placing a ward in some random corner where it doesn't reveal as much of the map as it could. In the third case, you could even argue that placing suboptimal wards makes them harder to find when your enemy is sweeping and searching for wards to destroy. Those few cases aside, we can still differentiate what wards are better. Ideally, you want to gain as much information as you can. Aside from placing wards deep, one other thing you want to consider is how your wards help your team. One concept I want you all to understand is that you can place wards to complement the vision your team has already established. For example, if you're playing mid lane on the blue team, placing a ward in the brush adjacent to your lane gives you a decent amount of information. A lot of high elo players will straight up tell you that ward sucks and to avoid it though. The reason for this is that it doesn't help the rest of your team much. If you were to place the ward deeper, like next to Raptors, it could help your top laner out a ton as well. Not only can it spot an enemy jungler out, it can also alleviate pressure for your top laner. They want deeper vision to see the enemy jungler earlier, so ideally they want to place a ward in the enemy tri-brush. However, if their mid laner doesn't provide a ward to complement that tri-brush ward, there's nothing stopping the enemy jungler from walking all the way through the river and ganking them anyway. Thus, a top laner without a ward from their mid laner would be forced to go for a shallow ward in the river. For a mid laner on the red team, the same example would apply for the bot lane instead. As a quick side note, the mid lane brush ward isn't completely useless. Some champs like Lee Sin can hop into the brush from over the wall and then wait for their abilities to go off cooldown and look for a sneaky gank attempt. Although niche, that doesn't properly describe it because there is a time and a place for it. Warding can be pretty intricate, and you'd be able to learn a lot from our high elo coaches over at ProGuides.com. Hit one up and ask them whatever questions you might have. They might be able to teach you special exceptions like what we just mentioned. Next, let's talk a little bit more about deep vision. It's ideal, but not always possible to get. As a result, we also can't say shallow vision is objectively bad either. Go too far into the enemy's jungle or river, and you could quickly find yourself dead. Vision is not worth dying for, unfortunately. Shallow vision is acceptable when you're behind or don't feel safe enough to venture deeper into the enemy jungle. However, when you're pushing an advantage of some sort, even if it's a small one like pushing a minion wave into the enemy turret, you should make an effort to throw the ward deeper into the enemy jungle. Deep wards can go everywhere, and they all accomplish different things. Let me tell you about 3 of my personal favorites. I'll tell you about them assuming you're playing the blue side, but you can mirror them on the red side. Number 1, where the crossroads meet by the blue sentinel brush. This is a powerful ward that can spot out rotations and, most importantly, the enemy jungler. The only way an enemy jungler can avoid this ward while pathing through the bot side is by skipping wolves or taking a straight path from the inner mid lane turret to dragon, or by running straight through the bot lane. In the former case, a mid laner can ward somewhere on the bottom side of the map, or a control ward in the river can cover the gap. What makes this ward strong is that it catches junglers clearing practically any combination of bottom side camps. Whether they're going from Gromp to Wolves or from Wolves to one of the other camps there, you spot junglers in their pathing. You also get to see which way they exit vision, which gives you an idea of whether they're headed top to clear more camps or bot for a gank. Number 2, the brush above the ramp. This ward's biggest strength is how easy it is to get. You don't really need to push very far to get it, and it still provides plenty of information. While this ward isn't perfect on its own, if you can get a second ward in the top lane tri-brush, you have enough information on the top side of the map to avoid most ganks. Number 3. The enemy's Raptor Camp Brush. Warding right by the enemy's Raptor camp gives your team so much information. If you see them exit vision through the left side, you know they're entering your side of the map. The options they have are to gank mid, invade your jungle, go for Rift Herald, or gank top lane. If they exit upwards, it's either clearing more camps or ganking top. When they exit down, they're moving on to clear their bot side jungle. Raptors are a crucial part of any jungler's clear. They're close to the center of the map and also have a pretty good payout. Having vision of your enemy when they're farming raptors also provides opportunities for mid laners and junglers to try and invade for a kill or attempt to steal the camp. Again, these aren't all the deep wards, and you can always go for other ones. Think carefully about what information you gain from a specific deep ward and place them down when they'll benefit your team's game plan. Also, here's our question of the day. I just gave you 3 of my favorites, but I want to know what's one or a few of your favorite wards to place and why. I love reading your guys' comments, so let us know in the comments below because I'm sure all of us can learn a thing or two from each other. Alright, let's get back to the video. I briefly mentioned a control ward while covering deep wards. They get their own section in this guide because they're unique. As most players know, they're visible even without true sight. This is what makes them best placed in brushes. In most cases, you want to place a control ward in a brush that you can protect or one that's shallow so that it's less likely to get destroyed. These wards can potentially last the entire game, and you want to go for longevity whenever possible. However, the exception is when you're far ahead of your opponents. Like I said, you want to place them in areas that you can protect, and when you're winning hard, you're able to protect wards that are further in. Placing a pink ward aggressively, for example into the enemy top laner's tri-brush, is quite suffocating. They're left unable to place a normal ward into their own tri-brush, leaving them exposed to ganks. Naturally, players gravitate to destroying these sorts of aggressive wards. You can bait enemies into unfavorable fights while ahead. If your jungler is nearby when an enemy is trying to clear such a ward, you can go for the 1v1, which will then turn into either a 2v1 or a 2v2, but since you're winning, you usually come out on top. Aggressive control wards allow you to win more while ahead and keep the enemy's map dark. Next, here are some tips based on your role. No guys, you cannot pin it all on your support player when the map is dark. I know this is shocking information to some of you, but I'm just letting you know. It's a part of the game that's just as crucial as mechanics and understanding of your champion. Considering the fact that there's a cap on how many wards a single player can put down at one time, it's obvious that it's not a task one person can handle either. For the top lane, my advice is in regards to timing. I'm sure every player, regardless of their role, has at some point experienced the tragedy that is getting ganked while you're going for a ward. There are good times to go for wards, and there are times that it's much riskier. You want to try and ward when your wave is pushing into the enemy's turret. This is the safest approach because your opponent's body language can tell you a lot. If they're trying to play aggressively in spite of the fact that they're eating damage from an entire minion wave, you're right to think something is fishy. Let the wave crash all the way to the enemy's turret and for them to fall back. Even if you get ganked, you'd be in a 1v1 for a decent amount of time, meaning you'll probably be able to get out with your life. As a top laner, you're the most susceptible to ganks, you're in a long lane, and don't have a lane partner to bail you out either. Next up is the jungle. Most junglers opt to swap to a sweeper as soon as possible. There's not too much to emphasize as you'll almost want to swap at some point in the game, unless you're playing Lee Sin and need those wards for mobility. However, the tip I'll give to junglers is that you shouldn't default to a sweeper every game. Sometimes more vision is actually ideal. One such situation is if your team needs time to scale up. If you're weaker early on, the logical choice is to avoid fights. Sweeping out wards is a more aggressive strategy you use if you want to set up ganks. Instead, you can provide vision to protect your allies and so you can know when to be around for a counter gank. For mid laners, I have a couple of points of advice. The first is that it's always safer to wait for your jungler to be nearby before you go ward. Being at the center of the map means that the enemy jungle is always somewhat nearby. Even if they're camping a side lane, you're still in reach. Side laners can instead feel safe when their teammates on the other side of the world are suffering and wishing they hadn't queued up. You can't always have them hold your hand, but if it can wait, practice a little bit of patience. One other tip is to think carefully about which side you're going to place your wards on. Like we talked about earlier, placing a ward can alleviate pressure for a teammate and allow them to place more effective wards. Consider which side needs vision more. If you're confused about which side to ward, think about things like which side is winning, who needs the information more, and maybe even which lane you want to roam towards. For bot laners, my point of advice are to value control wards even more. Because you're in a duo lane, you can purchase 2 control wards together. This allows you to place them defensively, for example in whatever brush is closest to your lane, and a second one closer to mid lane to defend them. When your mid laner is not providing you with vision, you can go for both a tri-brush and river brush double pink ward with your support. Even if your support isn't buying any, they'll hopefully place their normal wards, and in a worst case scenario, having one ward out is better than no ward. We also talked about placing aggressive control wards when ahead. If there's no better place to put one, you can place an aggressive control ward in the deepest lane brush. This opens up another gank path for your own jungler and also allows your support to sit in the brush to create free lane pressure. Finally, here are some tips for supports. Support players typically have a pretty well-developed sense of vision control. It is a crucial part of the role after all. For support mains like me, here are my tips for you. When placing a ward, think about what's happening 2 or 3 minutes in advance. If you plan on roaming top, think about what will happen after you successfully pick up a takedown. Is this going to break the map open? Will your top laner start pushing for the enemy's inner turret? Assess what's best for your team to take as their next objective. If it's in the top side of the map, commit 2 or even 3 wards to set up their next play. On the other hand, if you know that your team wants to play around Dragon very soon, you should only commit 1 ward or even 0 since you're going to dip and sprint back to bot lane. Another tip is for support players in low elo. I see a lot of good stuff sometimes. People want to play around objectives and they set up vision control beforehand. The issue is that sometimes this vision control is set up 30 seconds in advance. This is not optimal because if the enemy team immediately sweeps the vision out, you're out of luck and you have to make a play with no information. Instead, if you can place vision a minute in advance, you have time to throw down the wards and then recall to refresh your stack. When your opponents take your wards out, you can wait a moment and look to replace those same wards. And that'll conclude our vision guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Like always, I also want to welcome you to check out our Discord. A link can be found in the description box below. Best of luck to every single one of you summoners in your games, and I will catch you in the next video. I hope you have a fantabulous day. Goodbye!